Divorce is an event that has greater ramifications for SMSFs because these types of funds have to satisfy the retirement savings requirements for usually a husband and a wife. Chris Hodgins, who is the client manager at Super Guardian, is with me today to discuss this issue. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome, Darren.
So if a couple gets divorced, what sort of options do they have regarding their SMSF?
Well, Darren, these days 1 in 3 couples do get divorced and the average marriage only lasts around 12 years. So if you have an SMSF, this might be an issue for you. Given the more complex nature of SMSFs these days, you'll probably want to seek legal advice from a lawyer who has experience in the family courts, as that will be the court that deals with the split. There are 3 main ways to split a self-managed super fund interest depending on how amicable the split is. So we'll start from the most amicable to the least. Start with the happy first. So if both parties get their legal teams together and they're able to come to a formal agreement about how to split the superannuation assets, and both legal teams are able to sign off on that and everyone consents, that can be done without using the court. The next option, which now involves the family court, is that the trustees can decide what they would like to split to each other, but they would like the court to formally consent that and make that event binding. That's called a consent order. The third option is where, unfortunately, neither trustee can come to a reasonable agreement with themselves and their legal parties as to how to split these assets. In this case, the court will adjudicate for them, and this decision is binding. A lot of trustees will also ask, can they take their superannuation benefit as cash if they get divorced? Now, the same rules apply here as to any other cashing event in super. If you'd like to take it as cash, you have either had to have met preservation age, retired, or turned 65. So what we're looking at here is a situation where the super money will need to move back into the super environment, usually in the form of another self-managed fund or another retail or industry fund, depending on the client's needs.
Okay, you mentioned that sometimes the split is not amicable. So what happens if neither party can agree who gets the existing SMSF?
Well, if neither party who can agree who keeps the existing SMSF, one of the options is to actually wind up that SMSF and to open 2 new superannuation accounts for each of the parties, whether those be a new self-managed fund or a new account in an industry or retail fund. As I mentioned earlier, this decision is going to be influenced by the type of assets the SMSF holds.
Now look, I understand this obviously involves legal processes and that sort of thing. What
of course
complications can arise out of all of that?
Well, as we have mentioned, it is a complex area and complications are bound to pop up. First complication that could occur is where an SMSF holds what you would consider illiquid assets. So a residential property might be fairly easy to sell in today's market, but where a self-managed fund, for example, holds a specialised commercial property or a commercial property that may be leased to a related or family business, this can cause all kinds of headaches for all the parties involved. It can be hard to agree on a price, whether the asset should be sold. This leads to a number of other questions. If an asset can't be sold, then the trustees would have to look at other ways of funding the payout. This might mean making contributions to inject cash to pay out certain members, and if that's not available, then there might be forced sale of assets. Another area where trustees often run into disagreement is determining the value of assets. Assets like the ones I just mentioned can be hard to value, especially commercial properties with specialised uses. Also, trustees will often dispute the value of certain exotic assets such as artwork or collectibles. Often they'll be worth much more to one party than the other, and the value can be disputed. LRBAs have also added an extra layer of complexity in divorce arrangements. We're yet to see a situation where a liability has been split between 2 partners. This often means that if the LRBA is going to stay in place, one party inherits the entire liability. Now, this can also lead to further issues with the leverage ratios and the bank being satisfied with one party's ability to repay that liability, and can even lead to forced asset sales. Forced asset sales are also something that should be considered, as this can lead to unwanted capital gains tax liabilities for the fund.
All right, Chris, well, it sounds like there is a lot of complexity and things can go wrong a lot of the time, but typically when would you say if things are to go wrong, they usually go wrong?
When do things go wrong? Well, Darren, things can go wrong at any time. Right from the start till the very end, there's opportunities for complexities to arise. At the start of the process, what can go wrong is more determined by the type of agreement the trustees are going to enter into. If it's an amicable situation, that proves a little bit more positive generally. Things are less likely to go wrong because there's going to be less dispute. The more dispute you have, the more chances there are of things to go wrong. So when things get to the court and the court has to issue binding agreements about how much and what assets, that's when a lot of dispute and animosity can arise. Whereas when we move down the path a little bit further, you get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty rather than the big picture. How things are going to be paid out, what assets are going to be transferred, and how they're going to be funded on a broad level.
Okay, well, thanks for all that information and thanks very much for your time, Chris.
Thanks.